I got into my husband's car and found a tube of personal lubricant in the glove compartment. I didn't say a word. I simply replaced it with industrial superglue. What happened next forced our neighbors to make an emergency call to the fire department. I'm so glad you're here. If you're watching this video, please like and subscribe to my channel and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story of revenge from. I want to know how far it's traveled. I sat at the kitchen table, the silence in the house as thick as morning fog, a silence that had become a constant, unwelcome guest. The old clock on the wall, a wedding gift from my late mother, ticked with a relentless, accusatory rhythm. Each beat a painful reminder of a life I was beginning to suspect was nothing more than a meticulously crafted lie. My husband, Adrian, had just returned from one of his countless business dinners. He looked not only exhausted but haunted, as if carrying the weight of a secret too heavy to bear. His face was etched with fatigue and guilt, new lines carving themselves around his eyes and mouth. He tossed his jacket onto the sofa with a weariness that seemed almost theatrical, loosened his tie as though it were a noose he longed to escape, and collapsed onto the bed. The old springs groaned under his weight as he fell asleep without even bothering to shower. The faint trace of his expensive cologne lingered in the air, but it was mingled with something foreign, a sweet, floral perfume, an intrusion, a brazen confession from a life I didn't know he was living. Minutes later, the soft hum of his snoring filled the house, once a sound of comfort, but now a mocking lullaby, a lullaby for a fool. I rose, moving with the quiet, practiced grace of a wife of 40 years, and began tidying the chaos he had left in the living room. His jacket, his wallet, his cell phone, his old laptop. The glow of his phone screen caught my eye. A new email pulsed like a sinister omen. I froze. Adrian never used email. He always said, "Marina, all this tech stuff is too complicated. I'd rather just make a call." Yet there it was, undeniable. A digital ghost whispering from a secret world I didn't know he inhabited. Curiosity, sharp and poisonous, pushed me forward. I opened the message. It was short, only a handful of words that shattered my world. "You were incredible tonight, Dad." The little red heart pierced me like a blade. I froze, as though struck across the face. Dad. The word echoed in my mind. Who was calling him that? And with such intimacy? My thumb trembled as I swiped down, searching for more. But there was nothing. Only a strange, anonymous email address, meaningless characters that yielded no answers. Only more questions. A shiver rippled through me, not from cold, but from a deep bone-aching dread. It felt like a draft sneaking through a hidden crack in my life, exposing a secret chamber I'd never known existed. From the bedroom, Adrian turned in his sleep, sputtering with a snore, his face calm and peaceful, a cruel contrast to the storm, clawing through my chest. My heart pounded like a guilty thief's. Quickly, I returned the phone, though my hands shook so badly I nearly dropped it. I carried on cleaning, each movement mechanical, robotic. When I reached into his pants pocket, my fingers brushed against a folded slip of paper, crisp and new. It was a receipt from a high-end steakhouse in San Antonio, dated that very night. I frowned. San Antonio? He had told me he was meeting his partners in Dallas. A bitter laugh slipped past my lips. Adrian despised driving to Dallas. San Antonio, though, that city carried warm memories for him. It was where his mother had lived before she passed, a place he often spoke of fondly. But who had he dined with in San Antonio while lying about Dallas? The receipt listed a party of 2. A bottle of expensive Cabernet Sauvignon, the very same. Wine he had once bought me for our 10th anniversary, a taste I'd never forgotten. 2 entrees, filet and pasta. I racked my memory, trying to recall the last time Adrian had taken me anywhere like that. Maybe 10 years ago, back when I opened my first bakery, was the last time he'd celebrated me. That memory had been etched into my mind. The flickering candlelight, his proud smile, the way he toasted to my success. But now that memory was a lie. A faded photograph in a scrapbook of deceit. I pulled out my own phone and with silent determination, snapped pictures of the receipt and the email. I didn't want to believe what I already knew. But a woman's intuition, a wife's intuition, after 40 years, is primal. Something was happening. Something I had to uncover. My hands shook, not only with anger, but with a deep existential dread. I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, watching the collapse of my entire life. Draw near, I went to the garage. Adrian's old SUV was still warm, the air heavy with gasoline and that faint, sweet perfume clinging to his clothes. I opened the door, dread knotting in my stomach. Switching on my flashlight, I searched the driver's seat. Nothing. Just loose. Change and an empty water bottle. But when I reached into the glove compartment, my fingers brushed something slick and plastic. I pulled it out. My heart stopped. A tube of personal lubricant, the cap crusted with dried residue. A sticky, damning artifact. I stared at it in the dark garage as if it were a physical embodiment of betrayal. Adrian and I hadn't been intimate in years. He always claimed he was tired. That age had dulled his desire. So what was this for? The question hammered through my mind, shattering what little peace remained. Paralyzed, yet unwilling to falter, I put it back exactly where I'd found it. I wiped my hands raw with a napkin, scrubbing as if the treachery could stain my skin forever. I searched more carefully this time, methodical and relentless. Beneath the back seat, I discovered crumpled napkins soaked in perfume. Not mine, not his. This fragrance was loud, vulgar, defiant. A shouted confession of infidelity in the sacred quiet of our garage. I photographed everything, the lubricant, the perfumed napkins, desperate to trap their stench inside the cold permanence of an image. I closed the car, the weight of evidence pressing on me heavier than any sack of flour I'd ever lifted. Back inside, I sat at the kitchen table, trembling as I picked up Adrian's phone again. By now, I was almost certain. He was cheating. But when I checked his messages, I found nothing. Only work-related chats, sterile and dry, like a desert. His inbox was empty except for that one ominous email. I checked the sent and draft folders. Nothing. Everything was too clean, too perfect, suspiciously erased, a master of lies. My rage hardened into a cold stone in my chest. But another emotion stirred too. Darker, sharper. A hunger for truth. A need to expose the lie, no matter the cost. The next morning, before the first rays of sunlight pierced the curtains, I was already awake. The door closed, leaving the kitchen in silence, and me alone with a suspicion growing into monstrous certainty. I cleared the table and washed the dishes one by one, the rhythm of the task a fragile anchor in the storm of my emotions. I couldn't just sit there inventing theories. I needed truth. Hard evidence. I picked up my phone and searched for the number of Mrs. Miller, an old friend who had helped me when I first opened my bakery. Years ago, she had mentioned a private investigator who specialized in infidelity cases. "Marina, if you ever need it, I can give you Thomas's number. He's very discreet, very reliable. At the time, I had laughed it off. I never thought I'd need it. But now, I had no other choice. I dialed her number, my voice trembling, each ring pounding like a war drum in my chest. "Hello, Mrs. Miller. Can you help me get in touch with Thomas? I need him." There was a pause, heavy and telling before she replied. "Marina, what's going on? Did Adrian do something?" I sighed, unwilling to spill everything over the phone. My pride was bruised and raw. "I just need to know the truth. Please, can you help me?" Mrs. Miller, a woman of few words but keen intuition, agreed immediately. Barely an hour later, I received a message from Thomas himself. "Mrs. Roberts, please don't worry. I will help you. Meet me at noon at a small cafe downtown." The message was short, but it was enough to give me a sliver of relief, a lifeline in a sea of deceit. At noon, I entered the cafe, a tiny place with worn wooden tables and the comforting aroma of roasted coffee. Yet even that familiar scent felt foreign now, tainted by the turmoil inside me. I chose a secluded corner, hoping to remain invisible, a shadow in a room full of light. Thomas arrived, a middle-aged man, short and stocky, wearing a plain light blue shirt. His eyes, though, were deep and philosophical, the kind that seemed to strip away facades and peer straight into the truth. I slid a flash drive across the table. The photos I'd taken the night before. The email, the receipt, the lubricant, the perfumed napkins. "This is all I have," I whispered, my voice shaky. "I'm not sure, but I think my husband is cheating on me." The words tasted like ash. Thomas nodded, reviewing each image on his phone with an impassive expression, his pen scratching notes into a small leather notebook. "Mrs. Roberts, I understand. I'll start following Mr. Roberts this afternoon. Don't worry, I'll let you know as soon as possible." I swallowed hard, trying to contain the tears burning behind my eyes. "Thank you. I just want the truth, whatever it may be." His face softened for a moment, a flicker of compassion. "I'll do my best. Go home. And don't do anything to raise suspicion." I left the cafe and melted into the crowd, yet I'd never felt so alone. 40 years of marriage, a lifetime built on trust, were crumbling beneath my feet. I had given Adrian everything. I had believed he was a family man, a rock, my anchor. And now here I was, hiring a stranger to follow him. The irony was a bitter pill. I felt like I'd been cast into a cheap drama, a part I'd never auditioned for. That night, I sat in my bakery, surrounded by the soothing scent of yeast and flour, sorting delivery invoices with hands that trembled. My phone buzzed. Message from Thomas. My pulse spiked, the blood roaring in my ears as I opened it. It was a photo, Adrian in his familiar light blue shirt, entering a fancy restaurant. His hand wasn't empty, it was entwined with another's. I zoomed in, my heart stopped. It was Allison, my daughter-in-law. She wore a tight black dress, her lips painted a shocking red, her hair cascading around her shoulders. They didn't look like father-in-law and daughter-in-law. They looked like lovers on a date. Their bodies leaned toward each other, sharing a secret world. I sank into my chair, my hands shaking violently as I clutched the phone. Allison. How could this be possible? At family gatherings, she and Adrian had always seemed distant, barely speaking, and now, this. I realized it had all been a masterful act, a performance staged for my benefit. Mr. Thomas sent more photos. In one, they sat in a secluded corner, the table adorned with candles and flowers. Allison leaned toward Adrian, smiling, while he raised his glass to hers with a gaze so tender it crushed me. In 40 years of marriage, I had never once seen him look at me like that. Not even when we were young. When I was that radiant girl, from San Diego with long hair and a hopeful smile. Back then, his eyes had held love, admiration, adoration. I thought it was mine. Now it was hers. At 2 o'clock in the morning, another message arrived. A video. With trembling hands, I put on headphones, desperate to keep the secret contained, and pressed play. Allison leaned into Adrian's ear, whispering something that made him laugh. A full, joyous laugh I hadn't heard in decades. Her voice was sweet. Her eyes sparkled under the restaurant's dim light. Then they rose from the table, and Adrian, ever the gentleman, opened the car door for her, as though she were his lover, not his son's wife. I replayed the video again and again, each viewing a self-inflicted wound. Every laugh, every glance, another stab to my heart. Allison, my daughter-in-law, whom I had treated like my own child. The woman I had taught to make our family's flan. And Adrian, the man to whom I had given my whole life, the father of my children, the anchor of our family. What were they doing behind my back? Behind Daniel's back? The questions rose like a tidal wave, threatening to drown me. I saved everything, the photos, the video, to a flash drive. Carefully, I noted dates, times, locations, even the restaurant's name. My hands moved automatically while my mind unraveled. I didn't want to believe it. I couldn't. That Adrian and Allison were capable of such cruelty, of such a grotesque betrayal. But the evidence was undeniable. A mountain of proof towering over me. I stayed at the bakery late into the night, surrounded by trays of pastries that smelled sweet but tasted of ash. My world was collapsing. I remembered the early years, when Adrian would haul sacks of flour for me, when we'd laugh together in that tiny kitchen, dreaming dreams as big as the sky. Now those memories were nothing but beautiful lies I had lived for too long. The next morning I was back in the bakery's small kitchen, holding an order list for a downtown hotel. The scent of flour and vanilla filled the air. A fragrance that once brought me peace, now hollow and empty. As I signed, the delivery invoice. My phone vibrated in my apron pocket. The curtain opened slightly and Allison stepped out onto the balcony. She ran into Adrian's arms, her face lit with the joy of a young woman in love. I slumped into my chair, gripping the edge of the table to keep from collapsing. Another message from Mr. Thomas appeared on my screen. They also rented the room for the afternoon. It looks like they're staying the night. I'll keep an eye on them. I read the words again and again, my throat tightening as though invisible hands were strangling me. Just hours earlier, Adrian had texted me. "Marina, I won't be home tonight. I need to meet a potential partner from out of town. Get some rest." The tone had been sweet and caring, the way it always was. The tone I had trusted for 40 years. But now I knew. It was a lie. A carefully constructed lie. He wasn't out of town. He was here, in a 4-star hotel, with our daughter-in-law. I opened my portable hard drive and saved every photo, every video. Each time I pressed save, I stared at the images as if to convince myself I wasn't dreaming. In one video, Adrian's gaze toward Allison was unbearably tender. The way he brushed her hair back reminded me of how he used to do the same with me more than 30 years ago. Back when we whispered promises under the starry San Diego sky, believing our love would last forever. Now all I saw was betrayal. I thought of family gatherings, everyone laughing around the table. Allison always kept her distance from Adrian, sometimes even looking at him with disdain. Daniel would joke, "Mom, I think Allison can't stand Dad. She avoids him like the plague." I had believed it. I thought their distance was awkwardness. Nothing more. But now I understood. It had all been a performance. A carefully choreographed act of deception. For me, for Daniel, for everyone. I felt like the biggest fool alive, betrayed by two traitors hiding in plain sight. Meanwhile, life outside carried on as usual. Neighbors walking dogs, children laughing. In the street. Nobody knew what was happening on that hotel balcony. But Mr. Thomas had captured it. A silent hunter, exposing my reality one photograph at a time. I texted back, "Thank you. Please keep watching. I need to know everything." He replied simply, "I will. Stay calm." That night, I returned to the house I'd shared with Adrian for decades. It felt alien, haunted by lies. With grim determination, I opened my dresser drawer and pulled out a thick envelope. I printed every piece of evidence. The photos of Adrian and Allison at the law office, the images of them entering the hotel, the balcony pictures, every frame of the video. I placed them inside the envelope, sealed it, and hid it beneath old family photographs. I picked up one picture, the four of us at Daniel's birthday years ago. Allison smiling brightly, hugging Daniel. Adrian standing beside me, his arm around my shoulder, his face proud. Now I wanted to shred it into pieces. Before dawn, I heard the front door creak open. Adrian staggered inside, reeking of alcohol. "The partner was too difficult, Marina," he muttered in a hoarse voice, his eyes bloodshot. "I had to drink a lot. I'm dead tired." I stood in the kitchen with a glass of water, watching him play his part, as if pouring salt into an open wound. "Rest," I replied calmly, my voice steady. "You have work tomorrow." He nodded, patted my shoulder like it was nothing, and stumbled to bed. Minutes later, he was snoring peacefully, like an innocent man, as if he hadn't spent the night in a hotel room with our daughter-in-law. Then my phone vibrated. A call from Mr. Thomas. His voice was low, cautious, almost a whisper. "Mrs. Roberts." I managed to record their conversation in the hotel parking lot. Special equipment. They didn't notice. I'm sending it to you now. My heart thundered against my ribs, but I forced my voice steady. "Thank you, Thomas. Send me the file." Moments later, an audio recording appeared in my messages. I put on my headphones, sat at the kitchen table, and pressed play. The first voice I heard was Allison's. Cold, ambitious, a stranger's voice. "Dad, hurry up with that fake contract. I want the whole chain of stores already. I want that old hag out of the house." The words slammed into me like a hammer. My chest tightened, and I clutched the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. Then came Adrian's voice, deep, confident, cruelly familiar. "Don't worry about those papers. Marina doesn't know anything. Leave it in my hands." She trusts me too much. The sound of it was a knife twisting inside me. They weren't just cheating on me. They were plotting to take everything. The bakery chain. My life's work. My sweat, my tears. Every sleepless night. Every batch baked with aching hands. Every delivery run I made to protect my reputation. All mine. Adrian had never once dirtied his hands in that kitchen. Never worked the counter. Never signed the contracts. With hotels. And now he and Allison wanted to strip it all away, to throw me out of the house I had made into a home. My vision blurred, but I kept my composure long enough to copy the audio onto the flash drive with the other evidence. Carefully, methodically, I wrote down the time and location, clinging to the act of documentation as if it were the only thing keeping me from shattering. The next morning, as I poured coffee in the bakery, my phone vibrated again. More photos, from Thomas. Taken with a telephoto lens, they showed Adrian and Allison in his car, a thick stack of papers between them. Allison held a red pen, marking the documents with meticulous focus. Adrian sat beside her, nodding, smiling, complicit. Thomas added a note. I overheard them. They plan to use a contact at the notary's office to make the transfer. I'll investigate further. I zoomed in on the papers. I couldn't make out the words, but I didn't need to. I knew. These weren't business forms. They were the instruments of my downfall. Step by step, they were planning to rob me of everything I had built. I sat among trays of fresh pastries, their sweet scent mocking me, my world collapsing all over again. I replayed the audio, forcing myself to hear every word. That wretched old woman. That's what Allison had called me. Memories crashed against me. Her first years in the family, when I had welcomed her like a daughter. When I taught her to make rice, when I hugged her as though she were my own. I had believed she would be the one alongside Daniel to build a strong future. And Adrian, my Adrian, whom I had loved since girlhood in San Diego, who had sworn he would be with me until the end. Together they had made me a joke, a fool who still believed in love and family. The bell rang. Mrs. Peterson came in, as she did every week, to buy pastries for her grandchildren. She smiled warmly. Marina, your bakery has been so busy lately. The chain is expanding. I'm proud of you. I forced a smile. Thank you. I'm doing my best. Inside, I was crumbling. Would she see me as strong if she knew? Or only as a pathetic fool, betrayed by both her husband and her daughter-in-law? Wrapped her pastries, wished her well, and when she left, I sank into my chair, my head in my hand. His face turned red as he slurred his words about a difficult client he had met that day. I nodded as if I were listening, but inside I wanted to scream. Do you think I'm that stupid? When he finally staggered toward the bedroom, I cleared. The table. Every movement was slow, deliberate, holding back the storm boiling inside me. He collapsed onto the bed, snoring almost instantly, leaving his car keys on the nightstand. They glimmered under the dim light. A siren's call to my revenge. My heart pounded in my chest. This was my chance. My moment. I entered the bedroom, step by step, careful not to make a sound. Each step felt like walking a line between pain and resolve, between the past I had lived and the unknown future I was stepping into. I took the keys, gripping them tight, and went straight to the garage. The night was still, hushed, as if the world itself held its breath. Crickets chirped outside, their song a mocking soundtrack to my silent fury. I switched on my phone's flashlight, its weak beam illuminating Adrian's old SUV, a silent accomplice in his betrayal. I opened the door. The familiar stench of gasoline, mixed with the sickly sweet perfume that clung to his clothes. I opened the glove compartment, and there it was, the tube of lubricant. The cap loose, the residue dried along the edges, a monument to their infidelity. I held it in my hand, disgusted, as though I were gripping their dirty secret. Proof that they had used it again. Proof that their twisted little game continued. Carried it back to the kitchen, set it on the counter, and washed my hands with lemon soap. I scrubbed until my skin burned, desperate to erase even the faintest trace of their betrayal. The citrus scent didn't soothe me, but it sharpened my focus. I opened the tool drawer. There it was, a tube of clear industrial superglue, the same I had once used to fix a chair at the bakery. A tool of my trade. Now, a weapon of my revenge. I unscrewed the lubricant cap and filled the tube slowly, drop by drop, until it brimmed with glue. I wiped the nozzle clean, shook it gently, even, tested a little. It came out smoothly, indistinguishable from the real thing. At a glance, no one would ever notice. I smiled faintly, though a hurricane raged inside me. This wasn't a prank. It was justice. The first step. I replaced the tube in the glove compartment, adjusted the seat and floor mat exactly as they had been, and closed the door carefully. I checked the trunk, crumpled bags, an empty water bottle, and in the corner, an unused condom. My heart skipped, but I wasn't shocked anymore, only grimly confirmed. I snapped photos, adding them to my growing collection of evidence. Every image another reminder. They couldn't be allowed to win. Back inside, I returned the keys to the nightstand beside Adrian's alarm clock. Then I picked up an old book and sat on the living room sofa, pretending to read under the dim lamp. The words blurred. My head spun. I thought of Daniel, my son. Innocent. Believing he lived happily with Allison, never imagining her betrayal with his own father. How could I tell him? How could I destroy him with the truth? I thought of the bakery, Jane. 40 years of sweat, of sleepless nights, of bitter fights with Adrian to defend my dream. I had trusted that, deep down, he supported me. Now I knew he was only waiting. Waiting for the right moment to take everything away. An hour later, Adrian stumbled out of the bedroom, groggy. He reached for water in the kitchen and spotted the keys on the counter, right where I'd placed them. "Still not sleeping, Marina?" he mumbled. I smiled. "No, just reading a bit. Finish your water and go back to bed." He nodded, drained his glass and shuffled back to the bedroom. Soon his snores filled the house. I stared at him through the doorway. This man, who had once sworn to love me until the end, was planning to destroy everything I cherished. But what he didn't know was that I had already begun my counterattack. At dawn, I was up before him, sunlight spilling timidly through the bakery windows. I stood in my kitchen, kneading dough, preparing flans and pastries for a large hotel order. To him, it was just another morning. To me, it was the beginning of war. I pressed the dough with all my strength, channeling my rage into every fold, every push. By the time I returned home for breakfast, my face was calm, practiced, betraying nothing. Adrian was already up, sipping black coffee. I set eggs and toast in front of him. "Adrian," I said smoothly, "I have to travel to Nashville tomorrow to sign a contract with a new partner. I'll probably be home late. Can you handle dinner?" I watched him from the corner of my eye. He looked up, startled, but what I saw in his expression wasn't worry. It was relief. "A big contract?" he asked, squeezing my hand with false tenderness. "Don't worry. Go ahead. I'll handle it." But the spark in his eyes, the curve of his lips, told me everything. He wanted me gone. And I knew exactly why. I smiled faintly and nodded. Thanks. I'll call you if I get back late. He took another sip of coffee, stood, and announced he had to leave early for the office. That's when I noticed it. His phone left behind on the table, the screen glowing with a missed call. The name flashed across the screen. Allison Thomas. My stomach dropped. My hands trembled. Before I could reach for it, Adrian returned, snatched the phone, and switched off the screen right in front of me. I forgot it, he mumbled with a strained smile before walking out the door. I stood frozen, watching the door close, the silence after his departure louder than a slap across the face. He wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. That day I worked like a machine. Deliveries, invoices, smiling at customers. But inside, my mind churned. Adrian and Allison, their affair, their lies, their betrayal of me, of Daniel. I needed more. Not just suspicion, not just photos. I needed to hear their voices, to catch them in their own words. That night, I pretended exhaustion. I slipped into bed early, whispering, I have to wake up early tomorrow to catch the bus, so I'll sleep now. He nodded, patted my shoulder with casual ease. Rest, Marina. Be careful on your trip tomorrow. I lay with my eyes closed, every nerve sharpened, waiting. Near midnight, his snores ceased. I heard him rise carefully from the bed. A glow from his phone lit the darkness as he crept from the room, believing I slept. I slipped out moments later, tiptoeing, hiding behind the heavy living room curtain. There he was, standing in the dark by the window, phone pressed to his ear. Yes, of course, he whispered. Come over tomorrow. We won't need the hotel anymore. Marina has to leave town to sign a contract. She'll be back late. A soft giggle trickled through the receiver. Allison's voice, sweet, poisonous. That's great, Dad. I sat in the kitchen with a cup of cold coffee in my hand, staring at the skillet of oil already waiting on the stove. It was the last step of my plan. A simple smoke trap, but enough to draw the neighbors' attention and expose the truth. Tied a thin string to the stove's igniter, ran it through the open window, and attached it to a heavy coffee can. One tug from a distance and the flame would ignite the oil, filling the house with thick black smoke. I tested it once. A swirl of smoke rose quickly, curling like a warning. I switched it off, wiped everything clean, and double-checked that no trace remained. Nothing that might spark Adrian's suspicion. I slipped on a jacket, slung my large purse over my shoulder, and pretended to leave for my trip. Before leaving, I stepped into the bedroom and shook him gently. I have to go to the bus station now, I said softly. I'm signing the contract today. I'll be home late. His eyes fluttered open, sleepy, trusting. All right, Marina. Be careful. Call me if you need anything. He buried his face, back in the pillow, unaware of the trap lying in wait. I stood for a moment, looking at the man I had once loved and trusted. Then I turned away, my heart heavy, but my steps steady. Instead of the bus station, I crossed the street to Mrs. Peterson's house. She opened the door, her expression worried when she saw my bag. Marina, what are you doing out so early? Is something wrong? I forced a smile. Can I stay here for a few hours? I need to watch my house. Her frown deepened, but she didn't ask questions. She poured me a hot cup of coffee and set a chair by the window. From there, I had a clear view of my front door. The stage was set. At 10 a.m., a taxi stopped at the curb. Allison stepped out in a light floral dress, oversized sunglasses masking her face as though she feared recognition. Hadrian opened the door, glanced nervously around, then hurried her inside. My fingers tightened around the coffee cup, my pulse pounding in my ears. "It's time," I whispered. I opened the app on my phone, connecting to the recorder hidden in the bedroom. Through my headphones came the sounds of laughter, glasses clinking, footsteps on the floorboards. Hadrian's voice rumbled low. "All right, no more hotels. We can be comfortable here now." Allison giggled, her tone sharp as a blade. "You really know how to pick your moments. The old hag is gone, right?" The words seared me, but I bit my lip and swallowed the rage. Then came the sound I dreaded, the bed creaking muffled movements. Proof enough. I closed my eyes, drew a slow breath and told myself, "Just a little longer, Marina. Just a little longer." Moments later, Allison's voice pierced the silence, shrill with panic. "What the hell is this? We're stuck." Hadrian barked, "Shut up! Wait, let me see!" I smiled. My moment had come. I tugged the string from Mrs. Peterson's window. The igniter clicked. The oil on the stove flared, releasing a thick wave of black smoke that curled out of my kitchen window like a signal fire. Mrs. Peterson gasped, "Marina, your house is on fire!" I widened my eyes, feigning fear, but inside I was calm. Cold, focused. Neighbors poured into their yards, shouting, "Call the fire department! Marina's house is burning!" Mr. Miller dialed frantically, his voice carrying urgency into the air. And I sat there, gripping my coffee cup, watching. Everything unfolding exactly as I had planned. In my headphones, Allison's voice rose higher, desperation cracking her words. "Julian, do something! I can't move!" Hadrian's voice snarled back, furious and helpless. "Stop screaming! I'm trying!" But I knew they couldn't. The industrial superglue had already done its work. They were trapped, caught in the web of their own lust and lies, at the very moment they thought they had won. And for the first time in years, I felt a dark satisfaction. Not because I was cruel, but because they had pushed me here. They wanted to take my bakery, my family, even my honor. Now it was time for them to pay. The smoke rose thicker, black spirals curling into the sky. Neighbors gathered in the street, their voices rising in panic. "What's going on?" one asked. "Where's Marina?" Another said, "She went out of town for work. That's what I heard." Beside me, Mrs. Peterson clutched my hand. Her eyes, sharp with suspicion, searched mine. She didn't ask, didn't accuse. She simply squeezed tighter, as though she already knew. 10 minutes later, the shrill cry of a fire truck siren tore through the air. The red vehicle sped down the street and screeched to a halt in front of my house. My son jumped out first, Daniel, in his fire chief uniform, his face grim, his voice commanding. "Get the equipment ready. There might be people inside." The word stabbed me. My Daniel, always so proud of his family, his parents, always holding us high in his heart. Now he was about to witness the ugliest truth. I longed to run to him, to hold him, to whisper, "I'm sorry." But I stayed still. The plan was already in motion. The smoke poured out of the kitchen window, convincing Daniel and his men the fire was serious. With a roar, Daniel swung a sledgehammer into the front door. The splintering wood echoed through the neighborhood. His team surged forward with hoses and extinguishers. From my headphones, The chaos in the bedroom spilled into my ears. Julian's desperate shouts tangled with Allison's sobs. "Do something, Julian! I can't move! Shut up, don't scream!" he snarled. I clenched my teeth, gripping the phone tightly. They were trapped, just as I had calculated. Then came Daniel's voice, breaking as he entered the bedroom. What is this?" Behind him, a firefighter whispered, shocked. "Oh my God." Another let out a nervous laugh before Daniel's voice cracked like a whip. "Silence!" I knew that shout wasn't just about control. It was my son's last desperate attempt to hide his pain. But there was no hiding. The humiliation was complete. His father and his wife, caught in filth, exposed not just to Daniel but to his entire team, to the whole neighborhood. A firefighter hurried out to report. "Chief, the smoke is under control. It was just a small oil fire. Nothing serious." But Daniel didn't answer. He was still inside, frozen in the wreckage of his own family. Outside, whispers turned into shouts. "What's happening?" "It's Julian and his daughter-in-law." Oh my God, how could this happen? Mrs. Peterson lifted her phone, recording. Silently, her camera zoomed in on the bedroom, on Julian and Allison writhing in humiliation. She turned to me, her voice trembling with both pity and rage. "Marina, you knew, didn't you?" I didn't speak. I only nodded, my eyes fixed on the window. Inside, I heard Julian's voice rasp, desperate. "Get everyone out of here. Daniel, close the door." But it was too late. The neighborhood was gathered, faces twisted with disgust, with disbelief. Their whispers spread like they were carried out, wrapped in thin sheets, as the murmurs around them swelled into a storm. What a disgrace! Father-in-law and daughter-in-law, my God, how filthy! The ambulance siren wailed, carting them away. But the crowd remained. Laughter cut through the panic. "What a show!" Mr. Miller shouted. "I can't believe two people could be so shameless." An elderly woman shook her head and whispered to her neighbor. "Poor Marina." I stood among them, feigning shock, pretending I had just rushed back from the bus station. Daniel stood in the yard, pale as a ghost, his arms limp at his sides. His men avoided his eyes, quietly packing their gear. I knew what shattered him wasn't only the grotesque scene of his father and his wife entangled in disgrace. It was the double betrayal, the collapse of the two pillars he had trusted most. I longed to embrace him, to shield him, but I forced myself to stay silent. Instead, I walked with Mrs. Peterson, who guided me to the hospital without a word. Hours passed. I kept the mask of a concerned wife who had just discovered her house fire. Finally, a doctor emerged, sweat glistening on his forehead. He lowered his voice. "Mrs. Roberts, we managed to separate them. Fortunately, no serious injuries, just some skin irritation. They'll need ointment." I nodded, feigning relief, though my fingers brushed against my purse where I'd hidden 2 tubes of thick mustard. "Thank you, Doctor," I said softly. "May I see them?" At the nurse's station, a young nurse handed me 2 tubes of ointment, her eyes full of pity. "Ma'am, I'm so sorry. This must be so hard." I gave a weak smile. The moment she turned her back, I slipped the ointment into my purse and replaced it with the mustard tubes. My hands moved with steady precision, as though I had rehearsed the motion 100 times. When I entered the room, Allison lay on the bed, her hair disheveled, her eyes swollen with tears. Julian looked pale, defeated. "Marina," he croaked, I can explain." I didn't let him finish. I set the mustard tubes on the bedside table, my face unreadable, then turned and walked out. Minutes later, a scream tore through the hallway. Allison's shrill voice broke the silence. "It burns! My skin! It's on fire!" Julian thrashed, on his bed, cursing. "What the hell is this? Who did this?" The hallway erupted. Patients peeked from their rooms. Visitors clustered in doorways. "It's them." An old woman whispered. "The couple from the video this morning. The father-in-law with the daughter-in-law." Another voice added coldly, "They deserve it." The doctor rushed in with nurses, barking orders to wash their skin and apply a neutralizing agent. But it was too late. The humiliation was already complete. Mrs. Peterson's video of them being carried out earlier had already spread across the neighborhood. And now it was everywhere. On social media, the shame of two traitors magnified for the world to see. I listened to the growing murmurs, standing quietly in the hallway, calm amid the chaos. The whole world was witnessing their downfall. When the crowd thinned, Daniel walked in. His face was blank, his steps heavy. In his hands he carried a thick folder, the one I'd asked him to retrieve. Inside it were the photographs, the recordings, the hidden envelope of evidence, and the divorce papers I had prepared. Without a word, he handed it to me. His eyes avoided mine, hollow from betrayal. I opened it, pulled out the documents and placed them on the table in front of Julian and, "Allison," my voice was cold but steady. 40 years of marriage end here. Sign these, then do whatever you want. But stay out of my life, and out of my son's." Allison collapsed, sobbing, reaching toward Daniel. "Honey, please. Forgive me. I made a mistake. Please, I beg you." But Daniel's eyes were hard as stone. He turned and walked out without a word. Julian reached for my hand, his voice trembling. "Marina, listen to me. I didn't want this." I pulled away, cutting him off. "Don't say another word. You chose this path." "Marina, please," he shouted, desperation breaking his voice. But I had already turned my back. The nurse entered briskly, her voice firm. "Be quiet. This is a hospital." I turned and walked away without looking back. In the hallway, Daniel leaned against the wall, his head buried in his hands. I placed my hand gently on his shoulder, but he didn't lift his face. "Mom," he whispered, his voice raw and broken. Why did it have to be Dad? Why her? I didn't answer. I simply wrapped my arms around him, holding him tightly, letting our shared silence carry the weight of our grief. Julian and Allison had lost everything. Their honor, their marriage, their scheming plans. But Daniel and I had lost something, too. We had lost a family. I prayed that time would bring us peace. Weeks later, the bakery was busier than ever. The little bell above the door jingled endlessly as customers came and went, their faces warm, their words full of support. "Marina, you're so strong," Mrs. Peterson told me as she collected a bag of freshly baked flan. "The whole neighborhood is proud of you for defending your business, for defending yourself, amidst all that filth." I smiled and thanked her. They saw me as strong. But only I knew the truth. That my strength was pieced together from the shards of a broken heart. Every time I stood before the oven, the heat on my face, I thought of the decades I'd poured into this bakery. 40 years of sweat and tears, of dreams and sleepless nights. Adrian and Allison had tried to strip it all away, but they had failed. I was still here, still standing, with my bakery, with Daniel, with a new life. Daniel moved in with me not long after that day. He didn't talk much about the scandal, but I could see the change in him. The lightness was gone. His laughter, once so constant, had dulled. His eyes now carried a depth of sorrow I couldn't heal. "Mom, I want to stay here. For a while," he told me that first night, suitcase in hand. "I'll help with the bakery, talk to clients, whatever you need." I hugged him, the warmth of my son grounding me, and simply nodded. He needed time. So did I. Every morning we opened the bakery together. I prepared the ovens, arranged trays of dough. Daniel handled invoices, calls, orders. "Mom," he called from the counter one morning. "The Grand Hotel wants to increase their pastry order for next week." "All right," I replied. "Confirm the order. I'll prepare more dough." These simple moments gave me a peace I hadn't felt in years. No more fake smiles from Adrian. No more honeyed lies from Allison. Just Daniel and me, protecting what we still had. Dinners were quieter now. Just the two of us in the small kitchen, eating simple meals. Rice with beans, bread with coffee. One evening, "Don't worry, Mom. I'll never leave you alone." Those words were like medicine. They healed something broken inside me, gave me back the faith that even though I had lost so much, I still had my son, and he would always be by my side. 1. Afternoon. As the bakery buzzed with customers, I sat at the cash register and looked out into the busy street. The bell above the door chimed non-stop. The sweet aroma of bread and pastries filled the air, wrapping the room in warmth. I glanced at the trays of flan, the pastries, the ovens, and I thought about the journey that had brought me here. From a hopeful girl in San Diego to a woman who had endured betrayal, humiliation, and loss, yet had survived it all. Adrian and Allison had tried to take everything from me. My bakery, my family, my dignity. But they failed. I still had my bakery. I still had Daniel. And most importantly, I still had myself. Did you like my story? And tell me, which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you enjoyed this story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can continue to share more life stories with you. Thank you so much for your sweet support. It means the world to me. On the screen now, you'll see 2 new life stories I highly recommend. There are so many more waiting for you on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect, Marina Roberts.